Does God exist? Does God exist? What would you tell somebody if they ask you that?
Breathe. Just breathe.
Okay. What else would you tell them? You don't have to answer this question. Just think. Because that's what tonight and probably next couple of weeks is going to be about from different angles. This one tonight is humanity's intuitive theism is what we're going to talk about. Again, these classes are not made so that you can argue with people or whatever. And you're not going to prove anything to anybody who doesn't want to believe anyway. But you can give them information and help remove a few barriers. So that's what I'm hoping we can do. So tonight we're going to be talking about humanity's intuitive theism. What is theism? Belief in God. So you can be theistic. Muslims are theistic. Anybody that believes in God is theistic. So it's intuitive theism. You'll find out what that is in a minute. What are the reasons to believe that God exists? There's many ways to approach this, but I've got a list here that I'm going to try to go through, and we're going to do the first one tonight, and depending on how it goes with the others, because some won't take as much time as the others. But this is the list. The intuitional argument, the cosmological argument, the moral argument, the teleological argument, atheist admissions and decisive evidence of design are under the heading of the category ahead of that. Theological. Atheistic argument, which God exists, or teleological. Did I say theological? Teleological is what I meant. But anyway, which God exists, because many people believe in different gods. The Hindus believe in thousands, if not millions, of gods. And the Bible itself is proof of God. I'm going to read a quote from Leah Libresco. She's an ex-atheist. She's a writer. This was on a CNN interview. She said, kind of the same thing with any scientific theory almost, that it had more explanatory power to explain something I was really sure of. I'm really sure that morality is objective, human, independent, something we uncover like archaeologists, not something we build like architects. Now, what she's saying is, and I think I clarified after this, the question which idea, theism or atheism, explains this particular phenomenon the best, or to put another way, if there really is a God, what would you expect the world to look like? And what she was talking about, and what I want us to look at, is a lot of times instead of looking at it like an architect, we look at it like an archaeologist. In other words, we discover the truth. We don't have to build the truth. We don't have to build an argument as much as we have to discover the truths of the argument. And there's many evidences, naturally. And again, she said, Leah Libresco recognized the reality of objective morality and concluded that if atheism were true, there would be no objective morality. But if there is a God, then objective morality is exactly what we would expect to find. C.S. Lewis makes this argument in Mere Christianity, that all cultures throughout the world and throughout time have accepted certain things as being right and certain things as being wrong. No society has ever celebrated somebody who ran from battle, but you celebrate people who participate, who engage, who fight for a cause. You don't celebrate somebody for stealing. Stealing is wrong in every culture there's ever been. Killing is wrong in every culture that there's been. So there's certain things, certain moral codes that are out there, and C.S. Lewis makes a great argument. If you hadn't read Mere Christianity, get a copy and do so. It covers a lot of that. Humanity's intuitive theism. And I'm going to start with Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, if you don't know, is an atheist, biologist. He's supposed to be one of the great thinkers of our time. Not only is he an atheist, but he's and he hates religion and thinks religion should be done away with, period. It's a cancer on society, and that's the way he looks at it, and some more of the ones I'll quote tonight. So atheists are not all the same. There's many atheists that just don't believe in God, but they're not anti-religion. They don't want to do away with religion. But Richard Dawkins says this: why, if it is false, does every culture in the world have religion? True or false, religion is ubiquitous, meaning it's everywhere. So where does it come from? So here is an atheist who's asking a question. It doesn't make sense to him that there's religion everywhere and always has been. And so he's asking this question. Now we're going to get to what he's come up with, some ideas of why. Though the details differ across the world, no known culture lacks some version of the time-consuming, now listen to the way he describes this, time-consuming, wealth-consuming, hostility-provoking rituals and anti-factual, counterproductive fantasies of religion. Okay, so leave out the middle part of that, and you can tell where he asked the question, though the details differ across the world, no culture lacks some version of religion. When you leave out all that he tries, so you can tell his bias. Are you all biased?
Yes.
Everybody has biases, whether they admit it or not. And I've had people that I've had to quit discussing certain things with them because they won't admit they have a bias. But everybody has a bias of some kind on everything. It doesn't matter what. What's the best make of automobile, of cars? If I ask one person, they'll say this, somebody else say this, and so on. But it's subjective, but everybody has biases. And I said, do you pick up the hostility when you see what he's talking about there? The author concedes that humanity had the fatal tendency to shape truth to our beliefs rather than beliefs to the truth. Norman L. Geisler, I want to quote from I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. He's a Christian apologist, by the way. He said, one who claims to be a skeptic of one set of beliefs is actually a true believer in another set of beliefs. So a person that says that they're a skeptic, can't think of the guy's name now, that he goes around doing talks all over the world, and he's head of like the Skeptics Association. He's skeptical, but he's not skeptical about what he believes about atheism and about natural selection, but he's skeptical about all religions and things of that nature. So even if you say you're skeptic of one set of beliefs, then you're not skeptical of another set of beliefs. In other words, you decide certain things as being true whether you like to admit it or not. We all have biases, and Dawkins is showing his bias by the way he formed his previous question. How objective can it be when we already say what he said there? Time-consuming, wealth-consuming, hostility-provoking rituals, the anti-factual, counterproductive fantasies of religion. That tells you what he believes before you ever get to what he says. We should, and I put it here, we should spend less time trying to convince people of the truth and convince people of the truth of the Bible, of Christianity, of God being real, is the fact we just present the truth, lay it out there, and give them the space to deal with it as they will. And many times you don't realize that it's really affecting somebody in a way better than what you think it is. Atheist Sam Harris simply says this: similarly, several experiments suggest that children are predisposed to assume design and intention behind natural events, leaving many psychologists and anthropologists to believe that children, left entirely to their own devices, would invent some conception of God. Okay, so we have Dawkins, the atheist, saying that religion is everywhere and always has been. It's all over the globe. He doesn't understand it and so on. And Sam Harris saying here that children left to their own devices will invent a God if they don't have a God. So we're predisposed to that. So they're admitting that human beings are predisposed to believe in God, and it's all over. You might say, and I put this, some of you, you might say that there's a God-shaped vacuum or a void inside every human being is the way that we could explain it. The reason people are looking for God is because there's something inside us that says there is a God and we want to get in contact with that God. The assumption of the atheist is generally that there is no spiritual, only physical. Where does the evidence lead us? Paul Bloom and Dina, I don't know why these people don't get regular names. Dina Skolnick Weisberg's article titled Childhood Origins of Adult Resistance to Science, published in Science Magazine. I've got it here so you can see it. In May 2007, suggested that children tend to attribute purpose and design to virtually everything. When asked about the origin of animals and people, children spontaneously tend to provide and prefer creationist explanations. In other words, it's part of our nature. And atheists are admitting that. Deborah Keeleman documented research which led her to conclude people with average regular names don't study stuff like this. That the proposal that children might be intuitive theists becomes increasingly viable, and together these research findings tentatively suggest that children's explanatory approach may be accurately characterized as intuitive theism. That's where we got the title of what we're talking about tonight, is intuitive theism. In other words, by intuition, what do you pick up? Article in Cognitive Psychology, Margaret Evans. Here's a normal name. Why is the human mind, at the Western Protestant mind, at least the Western Protestant mind, so susceptible to creationism and so comparatively resistant to naturalistic explanations for the origin of species? In the light of current research, Bloom admitted there is by now a large body of research suggesting that humans are natural-born creationists. When we see non-random structure and design, we assume that it was created by an intelligent being. Why would we assume that? Bloom also said evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins was right to complain then that it seems as if the human brain were specifically designed to misunderstand Darwinism. People work hard, don't they? Could it be, it's not so much that the human brain was specifically designed to misunderstand Darwinism, it is that God is what human beings are looking for anyway, and we intuitively know that there is a God instead of trying to come up with all of these explanations of why there's religion and why children think like they do. Some atheists, like David Mills, writing from popular audiences, assert that we should recognize that all children are born atheists. Are all children born atheists? There is no child born in a religious belief. Well, there's no child born that can construct their religious belief, but we've already seen from the other studies that children by nature turn to design rather than to do natural selection. Overwhelmingly, the atheistic community recognizes the reality that humans are born with this is their quotes, lust for gods, a promiscuous teleology, I'm trying to say it with words that are hard to say, and a penchant toward, it's teleology, and penchant toward intuitive theism. In other words, we're programmed that way. Theistic apologist Paul Copan described mankind's tendency towards creation as a religious impulse that is deeply embedded in the universal human thought process. And we can agree with that. It is embedded. The question then arises, which understanding of the origins, atheism or theism, best explains why humanity exhibits intuitive theism? According to evolution, by this we mean, I want to differentiate here, there's a difference in atheistic and theistic evolution. There are theists that believe in evolution, and there are atheists that believe in evolution, and you have to approach the two of them differently because the way they start, their starting point is a different place. Natural selection eliminates physical structures and mental states that are costly in terms of their survival value. Okay, what is he saying here? According to evolution, according to natural selection, if there's something in a species that's to the detriment of that species, then it will evolve to the point where it gets rid of that's detrimental to the species. Okay? And this is an example, if they're developed a certain subgroup of humans with the intuitive idea that rabid COVID bears made good pets, what would happen to these people? In a little while, they would disappear. So that's kind of explaining what they're talking about. This mental thing would not pass on to the next generation because it'd be done away with, because the people that believe that would have been dead before they could reproduce. So that's pretty much what they're saying. If a certain group of humans tended to spend lots of effort on religious ceremonies that had nothing to do with their physical survival, and another group did not waste their resources on anything but their physical survival, evolutionists would argue that natural selection would suggest that those religious people who wasted their resources would eventually lose out in the race for physical survival. Well, that's according to their theory. And the non-religious group would be selected by nature to become more prevalent and replace the wasteful religious group, yet we see just the opposite. We see the opposite from what evolution is telling us would happen if that was the case. But they have a way to explain that. Richard Dawkins. Religion is so wasteful, so extravagant, and Darwinian selection habitually targets and eliminates waste. Daniel Dennett stated, whatever else religion is as a human phenomenon, it is a hugely costly endeavor, and evolutionary biology shows that nothing so costly just happens. Okay, so they're getting down to the meat of it. Dennett said that when people look at humanity all over the world, what they see is a population of over 6 million people, almost of whom devote a significant fraction of their time and energy to some sort of religious activity, rituals such as daily prayer, both public and private, or frequent attendance at ceremonies, but also costly sacrifices, not working on certain days no matter what looming crisis needs prompt attention, and abiding by a host of strenuously observed prohibitions and requirements. Okay, let me give you an easy example of this. Is Chick-fil-A open on Sundays? Retail sales logic would tell you if you're open 7 days a week, you're going to do better than if you're open 6 days a week, right? Logic would tell you that, but Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays, and they are one of the biggest, most successful franchises there is in the fast food industry. But why is so many people are lined up at the drive-thru? They're not lined up. So what? My point is, although this seems logical, Chick-fil-A themselves is an example of what we're talking about here. But Richard Dawkins, religion is so wasteful, so extravagant, and Darwinian selection habitually targets and eliminates waste. If Dawkins is correct, then why does religion still exist? Why is religion still around if he's correct? In their discussions and writings, atheists have sometimes suggested that religion possibly, and I know you'll like this, has such overwhelming health benefits that it is worth the expense. They note such things as results of research that suggests that prayer can lower stress levels or blood pressure. Or they comment on the emotional benefits of fitting into a community which religious rituals would foster and encourage. So you see, they're trying to explain for some reason why religion is helpful, although there's no logical reason as far as they're concerned why it could be helpful and good for anything. Virtually across the board, however, they have rejected the idea that religion is actually beneficial for the physical survival of mankind. So although they say there's benefits to religion, and you can see that show up in health numbers in many different categories, still that's still not necessary. Thomas Nagel, who was an atheist, let's say was because he passed away now, he made a confession that I always like having this in a Bible study when we're talking about apologetics. This is what this atheist said. I speak from experience, being strongly subject to this fear myself. I want atheism to be true and am made uneasy by the fact that some of the most intelligent and well-informed people I know are religious believers. He's uncomfortable by that. It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope that I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that. That's one of the most honest atheists I have ever heard, because he's telling the truth. It's not so much that it's not where the evidence leads him, it's the fact that he just doesn't want it to be true, period. If religion actually provides benefits that would be greater than any negative consequences, then it would be better for humanity to hang on to religious ideas regardless of their factuality or validity. That seemed reasonable, wouldn't it? Since most modern atheists are calling for the eradication of religion, they are forced to downplay its benefits and look for another answer that would compel people to want to eliminate religion. So now we're going to get into the meat of the atheist argument. Sam Harris contended that even if tribes have occasionally been the vehicles of natural selection and religion proved adaptive, it would remain an open question whether religion increases human fitness today. Okay, now look at this. How then does he square one, humans are intuitively theistic and such religious theism is extremely costly and does not bestow physical survival fitness on our species. How do those things exist in the same world? And what they've come up with is a mind virus. Theism is a mind virus that has been passed from human host to human host for its own survival and not for the benefit of the human organisms it inhabits. So it's a mind virus. So any of you all that believe in God, it's a mind virus that's been passed along. Dawkins explains it like this. Pardon me? No. The fact that religion is ubiquitous, in other words, it's everywhere, probably means that it has worked to the benefit of something, but it may not be us or our genes that it's worked to the benefit of. It may be to the benefit of only the religious ideas themselves, to the extent that they behave in a somewhat gene-like way as replicators. Is he working hard to get to some explanation for the facts? In other words, you have the facts, then you have his opinion. Well, if the facts don't align with his opinion, then he has to come up with a reason why his opinion is right. So it's a mind virus, and he...
Why do they have to infect us with their mind?
That's a good question. Dawkins has expounded upon this idea and used the term memes to describe ideas that he asserts behave in ways similar to genes. He contends that theism is a meme that acts as a mental virus, infecting people and forcing them to replicate the meme by teaching others about it and expending vast resources on it.
So it comes down to money.
Of course,
They want money spent on their ideas.
right.
On the
Why are you? Well, I ask you a simple question. Public schools, which one teaches creation? Which one teaches evolution?
Christian school.
All of them teach evolution, right? There's even Christian schools that don't teach creation. But so they're spending loads and loads of money on not teaching Christianity, not teaching faith, not teaching God, but teaching evolution, teaching natural selection, but yet they're still losing ground and can't figure out why. Dan Dennett has suggested that the common cold is universal to all human peoples in much the same way as religion is. Yet we would not want to suggest that colds benefit us. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Atheist Darrell Ray. Once a person has converted to religion, it is difficult to have a rational conversation about the irrational aspects of his religion. It is as though something invaded the person and took over a part of his personality. And he goes on to give an example. Well, I put it right here. It said, have you ever tried to have a rational discussion with an atheist? I have, and it's entertaining. Here's an example. Ray went on to discuss the situation in which a friend lost his father to cancer. Before the loss, the friend was non-religious, but after the father's death, the friend got a severe case, this is his quote, got a severe case of religion that changed his personality dramatically. Ray says there was no way to have a conversation with him on any subject without religion creeping in.
I have that same problem with atheists.
Would you believe that?
Yeah.
But it's terrible that things like this infect people. He further asserted that stress can activate, now get this, stress can activate chickenpox virus in adults, leading to a condition known as shingles. Similarly, stress tends to reactivate the God virus in many people.
We're getting around to the vaccine.
We're getting around to the vaccine. So, but before we get any further, just think about it now, how hard they're having to work to explain away God. So you notice I haven't quoted one Bible verse. I haven't quoted scripture. I'm just going by the facts that are on the ground, what's truly there. Okay? What flaw is there in this logic? If thoughts or ideas were self-sustaining, self-replicating memes that were simply out for their own survival, that would mean that the idea of atheism would fall under the same condemnation, right? Atheism could be a meme, a mental virus, a mind virus that's infecting people and being spread from one host to the other. In other words, the same arguments that they can make against Christianity, against faith, against God can be made against what they believe, what they say. Study all the history you want, and you won't find a time in history when the human beings were not worshiping a God in any culture, any civilization. If you accept the meme hypothesis, how could people be held responsible for anything they think or do? My memes made me do it. Is what heck is my memes made. You can't hold me responsible for this, but that's kind of the way the thinking would be. Your memes made you do it. Ray stated, and this is a quote, I'm using a lot of quotes tonight because I want you to know what they said, not what I say they say, but what they said. In viral terms, it means that people are so deeply infected that they are immune to influence and generally ignore any evidence that contradicts their belief. In viral terms. Yet it can be shown that to available scientific evidence contradicts major tenets of atheistic evolution, a fact that is generally ignored by atheistic community. And we won't get deeply into that because we'll talk about that a little later on as we're covering the different subjects. But there are a lot of things about evolution, about natural selection that it really doesn't make sense when you think about it, regardless of what you believe. For instance, what was the name of his book? The Origin of Species. In that book, where does he tell you that species originated from? He never tells you. He never says it, but he named his book that, so people say, well, he has that. Well, he must not, because he didn't write it down. He had a lot of questions, and he had a lot of circumstantial evidence and things that you could look at and you could read one way or the other. If there really is a God who is an intelligent, supernatural creator who loves mankind and desires that mankind should know the truth, what would we expect to see? We would expect to find humans pre-programmed for a belief in God. Have we already talked about that? Have we already said that that's what even the atheists agree on? We would, however, expect God to have so designed humans that to dismiss the concepts of creation and theism would be unnatural and would require some type of reverse programming. And we found that to be true. That an intelligent designer exists is the answer with the most powerful explanatory value. This argument for God's existence is sometimes referred to as the intuitive argument for the existence of God. So by intuition, by nature, by who we are, by how we are as human beings, we tend to want to worship a God. We tend to gravitate towards the fact that there is design. It's not just something that happened out of the blue, but it is something we tend to, the human beings intuitively are led towards. You have to work hard to get away from it. And that's what I mean by when we talked about intuitive argument. Anybody have any questions or comments?